Hey everyone, I'm Billy and welcome back to the Perantau Podcast, the show where we spotlight stories from Australia's Indonesian diaspora. Today I'm joined by Kennardi Sebastian, a virtual production operator and creative professional based here in Melbourne. Ken moved to Australia in 2018 to study photography, but it was during the pandemic that he found his way to 3D art and virtual production. If you've seen The Mandalorian, then those are the kind of sets he works on. On this episode, we talk about what it's like returning home after years abroad, the gaps he sees in Indonesia's creative infrastructure, and how he's working to make virtual production more accessible for emerging artists back home. So let's get into it. Here's Kennardi Sebastian on the Perantau Podcast. Well, thank you again for agreeing to come.
My pleasure.
On such a lovely day as today
pleasure,
anyway.
man.
But before we get into things, what's one word that you would use to describe yourself and describe your relationship with Indonesia?
With Indonesia, with things happen when I got back, at first, I would say a word that would describe my past relationship with Indo before I got back was a bit more detached. Detached.
Okay.
But now, I guess I'm driven. Oh, driven is an adjective to describe what I want to have, the type of relationship with my Indo. Like, I want to improve the relationship. I want to improve and help, like, the film industry there, right? So, like, there's that sense of wanting to help, for example, everyone to have access to virtual production, like the latest technology in, like, game and film and all of that. So, that's not one word.
I mean, the one word was detached.
Detached.
Right?
I was
and then
detached.
Where you want to get to is driven.
Yes.
Right?
I want to evolve into kind of like driven.
So what was that turning point then?
Basically, right, because my field is very niche. And when I first found out that there's a studio in Indonesia that provides this particular field that I'm in, I was quite excited because I would thought that it'll be in the next couple of years, or at least 5 years, until they have their own LED studio, right? But I found out that they have it in South Jakarta, and I thought that it'll be great once I got back, just even for a couple of days. I don't know what kind of opportunity it may present, just kind of popped my head. So I kind of took the incentive of just found a number on WhatsApp and in their website and just called them, hey, can I just visit you guys next week? Like, I'm from Unimel, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, yeah, sure. And it was a lovely conversation. They're very open-minded. It's an exhilarating experience for me because it's hard to find that combination of that niche experience as in virtual production, but then also as an Indonesian who's experienced that, because so far it's like I can't really, even though I speak comfortable in English, but to connect with someone in terms of that deeper level, when you're just with Indos, you're like, hey, So I had that kind of experience with the people in there and seeing how their goals are quite the same to what me and the university wants, which is the workflow, not the technology, not making money. It's more about researching a new workflow and pipeline in the virtual production industry. And hopefully, by some chance this year, I can help to establish a collaborative relationship between the university and that studio, so we can help each other in giving that opportunity in Indonesia and also having that kind of relationship, educational relationship, right? I guess, do I need to somehow give a brief explanation to what virtual production is?
Yeah, I was gonna say I think we skipped a few steps there, and that's on me.
Yeah, no.
But so you work in virtual production?
Yes, I work in a virtual production.
Could you talk a bit more about what do you do? What's the work like exactly?
Yep. Well, a bit of a past recap. about myself, I did photography, and a lot of Indonesians are surprised by that every time I bring it up in a meetup event, because they're like, "Oh, they have that here? Is that just an extra curriculum that you take?" I was like, "No, I did that for 4 years," and they're like, "4 years." So yeah, I did photography in RMIT, and at some point during COVID, couldn't access the photography facility in RMIT, so I kind of forced myself to learn 3D programs to express and create works in fashion using 3D and fashion photography using 3D. And ever since then, I kind of for the rest of my final year in uni, I kind of incorporate 3D in my photography work, and along the way, found a keyword called virtual production, which is a new type of production that was developed during COVID. Basically, shoot a you shoot an actor in front of a big TV screen, and you have a camera that points to the actor on the screen, and if the camera moves, the screen moves. So it's a technology that replaces green screen, right? So that's more or less the gist. But virtual production has the term of virtual production, right? It's been existing since the 90s. Like those cheap tricks of if you want to shoot someone driving without going to a desert or going somewhere too far that's a 2-hour drive, you can try and shoot it in a studio with a car parked inside the studio and just have a white background, and then you'll have a video being projected in the background, and that's virtual production. You know what I mean? Even green screen, a part of that is virtual production. So it's a wide term, but just a new upcoming technique, which is using the LED volume. That's the up and coming thing. And in the University of Melbourne, they've established an LED volume a couple of years ago. So like I'm the guy who currently operates the space and help facilitate students and teachers and lecturers in using that space. So yeah.
Yeah, because at one point you were also involved with a project, I think, from Universal Studios. It was, I think, a remake of an old movie. I forgot the name. The name escapes me.
It's from NBC Universal.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
yeah,
I can
NBC.
talk about that now, but at the time I couldn't. Basically,
because I think it was a remake of an old film from like the 1920s, right?
Exactly.
I forgot what the title was. Right, exactly. Because I think I saw the actual movie once a few years ago.
Oh man, I haven't saw it.
Still black and white, right?
Yeah.
But I think it was really interesting and how that could be adapted into. Honestly, I would have watched it if it was a series.
Oh yeah.
So then that was canceled because of COVID, right?
Oh, that was canceled because of a writer strike that happened in the state.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And basically they pulled the plug because hey, we don't have enough money to keep this going.
Yeah.
That's all I can say.
Yeah.
But there's
So at that point you were already finished with your degree.
Yeah. Even after photography, I kind of had this existential crisis of like, man, I just spent 4 years in here, and I just found out that I couldn't get a pathway to PR or that skill nominated visa, right? So I had to either pursue I kind of thought to myself, should I go to the States to study visual effects, or what should I do next here in Australia? And I kind of found this, I want to say university, but a gaming school that offers filmmaking and virtual production. That was the first cohort, right? And we only had 4 students. So it was more or less like a guinea pig experimental.
Yeah.
They're like trying to figure out what they want to do. And yeah, I did that for a year. It's supposed to be 2 years, but it got canceled because we didn't have enough students. So again, I was in that kind of like panic era. And then somewhere along the way, got a text message. Hey, do you want to be working as an intern in this virtual production TV show, blah, 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 with the art director of The Lord of the Rings? I was like, hell yeah, man. That was such a awesome kind of text. I still remember that moment. I just kind of screamed, ran along, and yeah, exhilarating.
Yeah. And that was 2022?
That was 2022, exactly.
So you came here 2018 as an international student coming from Indonesia, right?
Yep.
So could you talk a bit more about those early stages, and then carving, I guess, building your own talents? Because remember at one point we were talking about those early stages, and then you were saying like how there was a lot of hurdles in terms of learning a few things.
Yep.
Spamming the free trials for a lot of programs and all that, right?
Yep.
So what was that like for you? Those few years ago?
As I started out in Melbourne, coming in, look, I've been spending the last maybe 10 years before that just dreaming about going to Australia.
But why?
Because I had an exchange program when I was in elementary school for like 4 days, went to New South Wales, and completely fell in love with the place and the people here. So I asked my mom's friend, basically, who's quite an entrepreneur in selling photography, videography equipment. Like, wow, what's a good place to study photography in Australia? I was like, yeah, Melbourne, RMIT. I was like, all right. So ever since I was a kid, I kind of like have put set my goals for that. But yeah, and then when I came here, I remember spending the first week just like running around, like, oh my God, this is so big. RMIT is so great, blah blah blah, and it was interesting, right? Because I've never done like fashion photography. Like it's such a great experience to use those lighting equipments and like, well, I spent the majority of the first majority of my 2 years in Melbourne kind of focus on my course because surprisingly, it has like a 5 day week classes, and that's like from like 8 until 3, 8 until 4.
All of it just photography?
Yeah.
Wow.
Gila kan? Crazy. I was quite, and at the time I kind of lived in Reservoir
Okay.
with a host family because I was still underage.
Right.
So yeah, for the first majority of it, I was trying to find work. I was trying to get into a bit more comfortable, a bit adapting myself to that. And I remember, well, my mom kind of persuaded me because I was quite semi-active in a youth Catholic community in Bali, and I wanted to find that similar experience in Melbourne. Basically, found one, and from then, things started to get a bit more better in terms of my social life, right? Hang out with those people, and then with that, kind of found someone who, when I need to move out from my host family here, like, oh yeah, I'm looking for a place to stay. He was like, yeah, come in. I was like, oh great, good, cheap. And then the person who moved out used to work at McDonald's, and I kind of like, hey, can you refer me? At the time, working at McDonald's is seen as an impossible thing for an international student because it was so hard to get into without any kind of connection. Like I've spent a week applying to like 32 different places in McDonald's in Melbourne. So like when he kind of like just with a phone call, he basically got me an interview next week, which is awesome, right? In St. Kilda. And yeah, in that kind of span, in a couple of years with that youth Catholic, with McDonald, with uni, I've kind of like spent that. It was my life before COVID, just balancing all those three. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm probably just touching on that because you mentioned you were living with a host family, right?
Yep.
Was there a reason why? Well, yes, you were underage, but was there a reason why a host family, not any other type of student accommodation? I mean, because like
there's like that.
You have the usual ones in the CBD or like around Parkville area, Carlton, right? Because I personally, I was at International House, which is one of the residential colleges from Melbourne Uni, right? So it was like, why a host family in particular?
I think that was a cheaper option.
Fair enough.
I think at the time that was a cheaper option.
It probably is.
Yeah, it was a good and bad thing. Like she every dinner she's like, hey, there's like bread and tuna in the fridge. I'm like, all right, damn. such a different experience from Indonesians cuisine, you know. They think like a bread will do the job for dinner. I'm like, bro, I was so skinny back then.
That was probably like a snack for us.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like a snack. Yeah.
Exactly. And you're like, yeah, that'll do. That's what she thinks. But
do you still talk with the family?
Not really.
Yeah.
It was just a single person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like host family, I think that's a wrong. Yeah, host person. You know,
host person.
Host accommodation.
Yeah.
But
fair enough.
Yeah, not a lot anymore.
Yeah. So it was like those were the early years, and then did you feel homesick at any point? Because like you were saying that throughout that first year at least you were finding people. You started working at Macca's, and then you're starting to find friends in the Catholic Indonesian community here, right? So you were building community there. But then, were there any point where you just felt homesick, and then you didn't feel like you belonged?
I wasn't really feeling homesick that much because I've again kind of have been having this kind of dream and just imagining how it would look like living here. So it was still that honeymoon phase in that first couple of years, but don't want to go back until I'm established something here.
Yeah.
The sense of belonging, I kind of felt I belong here more in terms of the social life, because in Indo it was quite hard for me, because I think, I mean, I'm still figuring it out. I don't know. Maybe it's because I was a bit exposed to the Western culture a bit more, those typical kind of experience. Whereas there's that one side, or I think it's more since I've known what my goals are since I was a kid, which was different, right? So like the type of activities after school is more like me trying to prep for that, whereas everyone else is trying to, be a high school kid.
Yeah.
So most of the time, it's me being a social butterfly, where I have a lot of friends, I know everyone, but then I never really belong to a group.
Yeah.
And I also have like 2 siblings, so it's more. It's also been trying to take care of them, be responsible for them, and like with my single mom as well.
Yeah.
So like there's that kind of like pressure of being able to do well when I get here.
Yeah.
So like when I get here, I get that kind of gut release. Like I'm here now, so like I guess that also ease in the social life here too.
Yeah, no, I completely
so
get that.
yeah.
So I feel like, I guess that sense of belonging is something that everyone asks about themselves.
For sure.
But then everyone has different answers, right? Some feel
100%.
like they belong here more. Some might feel more belonging in another Australian city.
Yep.
But some might also find belonging in Indonesia with their family. But some might also find belonging somewhere else entirely, right? So I think the question of belonging is something that's really important for us to talk about, just because it's just always there.
Yeah.
Right?
How do you feel about it? I mean, like throwing that question to you, briefly. Yeah. How do you feel about that belonging, like in Australia?
I mean, I definitely feel more comfortable here.
Yep.
In the sense that, and whenever people ask me about where do I enjoy more living, right? And I say here not because of being more highbrow or anything,
Yep.
but more in the sense that it feels more livable. I feel more part of the city than I am in where I grew up in Jakarta.
Yep.
Because then you go everywhere, the lifestyle was just cars, malls,
Yeah.
AC,
Yeah.
school,
Yep.
like that's it, right?
Yep.
It's all the places that you would go to just for, I wouldn't necessarily say necessities.
Yep.
But it doesn't feel like there's a lot of places that you can go to per se, that feels like you're part of the fabric of the city. Whereas here, I feel like there's a lot of interconnectedness between the architecture, right? From home, from work, to third spaces, public spaces. I feel like the fact that we can walk to and fro from any other point does make it feel everything is part of the same fabric, right? They're all cut from the same fabric, and that's why I feel like it's more comfortable to live in.
Yep.
Hopefully Jakarta could get there one day, probably more financing of public parks. I know the libraries there are getting better.
Yeah, right.
Some private, some public. But I think definitely there's been a rise in that sort of consciousness. So that's good to see, right? But yeah, so I think livable spaces are just a really important part of what makes the city feel livable.
Yep.
And probably public transport as well, right? Because like here, you can walk everywhere. If you don't want to walk, you can take the tram, train, bus. Like, sure, you could get a car if you're going probably to the outer suburbs, right? Or just out of convenience. But realistically, if you just live within the inner suburbs of Melbourne, at least, there's really no point of a car. Right?
No.
It's like, if anything, you're just gonna get stuck in traffic.
Yep.
So I feel like that's it. Yeah. Do you feel the same way?
No, I feel the same way, because like growing up in Bali, sure, people are saying, "Oh man, you grew up in Bali, that must have been so good." But yeah, again, we're limited by the options of what we want to do as for fun. Well, people have different things, different views on fun, or like how they want to spend their time, but limited in a way that's not entertainment. For example, it's always spending money or going to clubs to relieve stress, or there's sports and playing basketball, but there's nothing that kind of relates to your career in terms of career opportunities. Do you know what I mean? That's limited, right? So I guess here it's just there's that sense of purpose and driven when I'm living here, because everything. It feels that everything that you do again comes from the same fabric, and it has impact on one another. It's not just like one and done kind of thing. You know what you're doing is gonna affect your career or in some way, in some aspect in your life, one way or the other. So like I guess that's for me living in Melbourne. Like there's that sense of like achievement whenever you're doing something here. Like there's something that's always gonna connect.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that kind of
No,
makes
exactly.
sense. Yeah,
And so you were born and raised in Bali.
I was raised in Bali, born in Borneo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So most of your schooling would be in Bali then, right?
Most of my school would be in Bali.
International?
Well, I don't know what it's called in English, but it's Swasta Plus. It's National Swasta Plus. What is
private?
Probably private then. But,
Private plus.
But but I don't want to overestimate the school because it's not like private good, private expensive.
Yeah. It's just
private and cheap.
That's fair. And
Yeah.
I think that really does beg the question in terms of you've had most of your life in Bali, coming in here as an Indonesian, and then now having spent a few years in Melbourne. Do you think that multicultural upbringing has impacted the way you approach your work?
100%.
How so?
I can be a bit more interesting in terms of sometimes
More
bringing
fun facts.
More fun facts. There's that you would understand, and also people find. Yeah, I would mumble sometimes in Indo, even though like I find it comfortable in speaking English.
Yeah.
Processing maths, processing numbers. Like I would do Indo.
I think that's most Indonesians,
most
myself
Indonesian,
included.
they would do that, right? And they're just like, oh, what's that? And like I would cuss as well in Indo, and I would teach that as well to everyone else at work, and that creates a special, and a unique bond for them as well.
Yeah.
And it brings a lot of relaxation into the workplace, especially yesterday when we did a lot of R&D throughout the day. But there was also this kind of second generation Indo who is, even though he's not fluent in Indo, it's still there's that kind of Indonesian bond,
Right.
brotherly bond. And I was kind of like, both of us are messing with each other, like with Indo cusses. And like everyone's like, oh, what's that? So now we're using that cuss everywhere in the studio. So yeah, it's kind of fun to even having that multicultural, bringing that upbringing here, even though it was quite hard trying to figure out your identity in terms of, are you Indonesian or Australian? Like, who are you? That kind of stuff, which is still, I'm learning, right? That's kind of like still one of the benefits, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. Now, but then on the creative side of things, because because like we met when I was meeting Christy. Right?
Yeah.
And then because like her work does draw on a lot of Indonesian folklore and horror, right? So I think there is more of an explicit connection on how I guess her own culture, or at least her understanding of culture, influences her PhD now. Right? Is there anything like that for you?
That's a good question. But at the moment, I guess it's still nothing. There's no academic goals or projects that's driven by that multicultural influence when growing up.
Yeah.
But I guess in a way, what I'm hoping to change that still kind of relates to virtual production, but not really in a kind of business side, is hoping to change the gaming culture in Indonesia.
Gaming
Culture. This is kind of like U-turn, but
So
basically
gaming in what way? Yeah.
gaming in what way? Because I think what I kind of realized when I got back to Bali is I realized a lot of people, I mean, especially me when I grew up, if we want to, for example, I used to have a Nintendo DS, and every time if we want to get a new game, like Naruto 2 from Naruto 1, you'll have to wait 6 months until, like me, I don't have access to that unless I go to Jakarta in Mangadua. You know what I mean?
Damn, I felt that, man.
Right? Exactly. How did you feel when you get here with JB Hi-Fi, with everything else? It's like, oh man, everything's at hand.
Yeah.
Whereas you have to make that extreme effort, and of course you have to rely to your mom and convince your parents that, hey, please buy some games and let's go to Jakarta to just get these games. Like, why are we spending that? Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
So like having that as a background, I really want to change the gaming culture in Indonesia in terms of their views on specifically internet cafes.
Okay.
Because like it's quite, again, everywhere now.
Yeah.
Like I'm going everywhere, but if there is like a fortress, if there's that kind of internet cafe access technology in Indonesia, I think that would make a lot of difference to people who want to access, like there's gaming, but also like computer rentals for
Right.
in the 3D side educational purpose, right? So I guess at some point what I would hope to change. It's a big vision and mission, but like I would like to provide and help by gaining because virtual production involves a lot in the gaming technology.
Yeah.
Like GPUs, blah 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 blah. I'm hoping to kind of like able to connect the two and bring the technical aspect of how we can run games smoothly, right? Making hardwares to run games a bit more optimized and smoothly. So like at some point we can provide great performance, cheap cost, and then at the same time also making a new business model, right, to adapt because internet cafes they don't update their business models, but then the technology keeps rapidly evolving.
Yeah.
You can't expect to have a sustainable business if you're renting a computer for like Indonesian, if it's $2 like 20,000 rupiah, that's already like expensive per hour to rent a high up kind of computer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like I guess it's it's a homework, right? It's a homework. It's a whole other kind of thing. But there's that kind of sense of me wanting to help Indonesians to basically getting into that culture of at least knowing what the game of the year is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of just playing mobile games, blah blah blah. Expanding their horizons in
Right.
those choices of entertainment. Because you said as well, it's interesting when you say in Jakarta, there's only limited option of for choice of entertainment like nightclubs, coffee, or malls. But like there's no if there's like a gaming culture night where you and your friend can just like go to a place, a hub where you can like play Minecraft together when you're a kid. I mean,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be exciting?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that would be a good option as well for parents. Like again, it's educating the people and educating changing a mindset, which is a hard job. But like you would want as a parent, you'll probably want to at least know that your kid is in this internet cafe playing game instead of roaming around
Yeah.
in other night entertainment stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's a big topic, but I guess that's kind of like what's in the back of my mind after I went back to Indonesia. What can I bring back? I think that's kind of the mindset I'm trying to develop now. Like what can I bring back to the people in Indonesia?
Jadi lu mau warnet but structured and organized.
With a new business model, yes.
Yeah.
Ya, jadi kayak bukan warnet yang kayak lo datang ini, I don't know, right? Business model gimana? Cuma ya kurang lebih itu.
Yeah.
In a very layman's term, yes.
Yeah.
An evolved warnet, but not warnet, just a gaming hub. It can be anything.
Yeah. I mean, the way I see it, I think the evolution from there would be having, I guess, events.
Yeah,
Instead of
exactly.
just renting per
And
machine per hour.
Esport is huge, bro. In Indo, right?
Yeah.
Esport is huge. Like
Yeah.
Of course, there's money to that. But just the impact and everything is huge. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
How do you think you'd be able to integrate your work right now in virtual production and all
Into
that?
that.
Yeah.
Well, it's gonna sound quite. I don't want to sound too technical, right? But as a studio operator in at my workplace, I also need to, with my supervisor, maintain the hardware aspect of how we run a huge LED screen, which is probably it's almost 10 meters height and then 4 to 6 meter long.
Okay.
Wide, sorry. Yep, wide. So it's a huge chunk of monitor that you need to render. So because I don't really wanna kayak kasih tahu juga kayak secret recipe dari kita tuh apa kan, komputernya apa gitu kan. Cuma kayak banyak lah komputer, a lot of computers. So I need to be updated into what's the best way to optimize those hardwares, and also there's the software side when we create and render 3D stuff. How do we get it smooth when we display it in the wall where it's not stuttering, blah, 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 blah. So I guess the efforts to lead to that goal of optimization in my area, what I can bring into the Warnet side would be probably picking the correct hardwares to run AAA games. There's that aspect, optimize hardware, custom builds, and also the insights of how in virtual production, like there's pipelines in. I collaborate with many different people gitu loh kan. Jadi kayak aku kayak mungkin bisa dapat insight bagaimana mereka interact dengan teknologi ini kan, dan kayak aku bisa dari sana kan ada insight yang beda aku bisa bawa ke dunia gaming ini. Aku kayak coba mikir bukan hanya not only on the technical aspect of how people just come log in and play, but like how do I create a new experience, a whole new experience of Whatnet, people coming into the Whatnet kan. Itu yang kayak the homework that I kind of need to do. It's quite kayak mungkin kelihatan nggak nyambung atau apa, cuma kayak itu yang kayak mungkin yang beda aku pengen bawa ke into the game industry gitu loh.
Do you think Indonesian studios will ever produce AAA games?
They have the talent, bro.
Indonesian has talent for a lot of things.
Exactly.
But to get to that point of realization, do you think Indonesian studios can get to AAA games?
I believe they do. Especially knowing how...
Like the bureaucracy-wise.
Kayak...
Soalnya itu loh.
Iya.
Birokrasi deh kan?
Iya, benar.
It's always the red tape, man.
Iya, benar.
Tapi kan soalnya kayak with a lot of the film industry in Indo, a lot of things just don't end up getting made because of the red tape gitu kan. I think with, was it The Last of Us? Yang tadinya mau shoot di Indo. I think
Oh, that's news. Yeah.
I think one of the scenes was supposed to be in Indo, but then they didn't end up shooting it in Indo because of red tape. It was like, bureaucracy, all that layers and layers and layers. Because I'm well aware that, the international film industry is used to, paying incentives for local people for licenses and all that.
Yeah.
It's normal,
It's normal.
But from what I've heard, like Indonesians just asked too much of incentives. That, it's like they just give up and then they just move elsewhere, right? Because there's been a few cases. I mean, that's one. I think there was another movie I forgot. I think a decade or two ago that ended up being shot in Australia.
Yep.
But yeah, so things like that, right? So I feel like that could be something to do in the game industry as well, right? Just so much bureaucracy.
I know. I guess, like for me, there's a lot of Indonesian who goes to the States, to Australia. They help a lot in the animation side, 3D side.
For sure.
Like Indos are talented in that way, but then it's so dumbfounding sometimes, right? Because of that bureaucracy, because of the red tape, they can, if they're willing to just, they're willing to get rid of that mindset, they would benefit them so much.
Yeah.
Kayak orang-orang Indo tuh sukses. Kalau yang in my kayak ada someone who's responsible in making 3D animations for aespa, which is the Korean girl group. I'm like, whoa, that's great. And then there's a couple of people as well who work in the animation Pixar. Tuh banyak banget gak sih orang-orang Indo sebenarnya kan?
Yeah.
Ini kayak lo kalau bisa, sebenarnya kita bisa buat yang kayak di Indo in-house gitu loh. Kenapa ribet? Kenapa harus buat susah?
Yeah.
Ya kan?
Yeah.
But that's a really big dream, right? But I think still, if it's a huge problem, but I'm quite hopeful. I'm quite hopeful of like that. Things can change. It'll take seeing how Indonesian sometimes. Agree me. You can let me know if you don't agree with this, but like Indonesians more or less are quite of a follower, right? In terms of like mereka tuh lihat yang kayak tren itu apa segala macam kan. So hopefully if kayak it only takes an event or something that's trendy for them to kind of like hopefully change that mindset, but we'll see, man.
Yeah.
We'll see.
And then, well, I guess now looking forward, because you were saying you still want to contribute back to Indo, or at least the Indonesian film industry as well, right? With virtual production and all that. So realistically, what do you think you can implement when you do go back?
Giving access to virtual production, but without the LED volume aspect technology, because this was not my original idea, but I was inspired by one of my coworkers who mentioned that, because that's his kind of view as well. I want to help that as well. I want to help him because he's more involved in the arts in Jakarta, in Jakarta. Like he's quite involved in that, right? And what I possibly want to give back is by helping him to develop that idea of this concept of an indie film can just shoot with a virtual production workflow with just a green sheet and a computer that's only the size of a briefcase, basically, right? And a very simple camera tracking setup for that kind of workflow without getting too technical. So that's what I'm hoping to contribute back, a workflow for a mobile virtual production workflow for indie films, because that's going to give a lot of access to people who wants to start making films about like in a sci-fi set, or people who doesn't have the budget to go to Bali to do that. They can just do it in a parking lot with green screen, a simple camera tracking, and then they can have that scene and shot in virtual production workflow. I keep doing that, but yeah.
Because I was gonna say, it's like, well, a proper VP set isn't cheap, right? It's quite the budget.
A lot of money that involves to that. Like, gila banget.
Do you think? Oh, I guess it goes back again, right? Because like, do you think Indonesia could have a proper VP set? Because then I feel like if there will be, then there would be an incentive to make it in the first place, right? What kind of incentive would that be?
Interesting, right? Because they already have that, but still a lot of people are scared. A lot of the people who's comfortable in the traditional workflow of filmmaking are scared of change.
Right.
And it's hard to, as you would know, it's hard to change Indonesians' mindset when they're comfortable and we're getting people outside of the comfort zone, basically. Right?
Yeah.
So that's happening right now in the virtual production film area, where they're having a hard time in accepting the change or like evolve with it. So it's being pushed back by that mindset, which is crazy to me. Like, so yeah, that's why they're driven. They're not taking that lightly. They use that as driven. They're very driven people. They have like high hopes, which I think I can't say for now, but like they have high hopes and they're not giving up. So like there's that kind of people. That's why I'm so happy. Kayak ada orang-orang yang kayak gitu di Indonesia yang kayak open minded, yang kayak mau fight untuk kayak virtual production biar kayak mau mengubah gitu loh. Just not about virtual production. Let's not just kayak bukan tentang virtual production doang, but it's more about change gitu loh. Kayak mau berubah, mau keluar di zona nyaman mereka. Kayak itu yang buat aku sekarang sangat senang dan bangga gitu loh. Kayak gila. Gue pengen banget sih coba gitu loh.
Well, I guess now to wrap things up. And this is probably a two-parter. What kind of advice would you give to young filmmakers out there, regardless of where they are, either in Indore and Melbourne, whether they're Indonesian or not, but as well as, on the other hand, what kind of advice would you give to Indonesians studying abroad or finding work abroad?
Recognize patterns.
Patterns.
Yeah. Kayak maksudku tuh, that's the first, I don't know why that's the first thing coming to my mind, but I think what I realize is recognizing patterns, right? Kayak recognizing pattern dimana kayak aku juga kayak nggak bisa ke virtual production kalau aku nggak bisa, aku tuh agak gamble di virtual production karena kan aku nggak tahu loh government bakal spend hundreds of million dollars of grant in virtual production. Cuma kayak aku bisa ada kayak lihat pattern di mana industri di film industri mulai pelan-pelan pindahnya ke sini gitu kan. So like I guess the tip would be trying to have insights and look for patterns in the industry that you're interested in gitu kan. Bukan kayak hanya focus on the technical stuff, on how to make cool things, right? You have to also ask yourself, why are you creating those? And then see who's in, like misalnya if you have a favorite work as coming from an art person, do the research of who's involved in creating that work in every aspect. Dan dari sana lo coba lihat patternnya, yang mana lo kayak bisa masuk di situ. Karena art tuh gede banget kan. Aku tuh banyak yang kayak, mereka mau orang-orangnya itu kayak banyak karena tidak tahu, because they're limited to, for example ya, kayak kalau orang mau tahu cara buat film tuh gimana, tapi mereka nggak tahu aspek segala filmnya apa. Jadi mereka limited into the option, kayak mereka waktu mau ke Australia itu terjunnya mau masuk kemana? Oh, kamera operating doang, oh visual effect doang, oh animation. Tapi kan padahal itu kayak per aspek animasi dan segalanya itu deep gitu loh. Di animasi lo mau spesialisnya apa? Tekstur, rigging, character rigging, animasi, visual fluid simulation. Jadi kayak don't stop at the ice level yang kayak iceberg level, lo harus lebih dalam lagi. Dan dari sana lo harus bisa recognize pattern untuk biar bisa give yourself the best opportunity gitu kan. Jadi kayak itu yang aku lakuin kenapa bisa masuk virtual production dari fotografi gitu loh. Aku kayak coba lihat kenapa, keren banget Star Wars. Siapa sih yang buat? Oh, siapa tuh virtual production crew? Apa itu? Gitu. Aku kan lihat kredit-kreditnya. Itu apaan sih virtual production kok bisa yang buat? Dari sana itu udah rabbit hole-nya. Baru aku kayak, oh Indo ada nggak? Amerika kayak gimana situasinya? Australia juga ada loh ternyata. Oh ternyata Australia ada course-nya. Oh ternyata Australia interested mau buat mau funding studio LED volume di mereka. Oh artinya aku harus prep diriku apa untuk biar bisa siap dengan itu gitu loh. Oh artinya aku harus belajar program-program yang relate dengan skill-skill yang virtual production itu biar nanti kalau ada job opportunity-nya arise, aku bisa capitalize on that opportunity. Karena bayangin aja gue sebagai kreatif di sini. Lo kalau graphic designer, kalau fotografer apa segala macam, pasti lo ke LinkedIn 200 orang yang apply kan untuk job. Ini gue cuma 17. Jadi kayak it accumulates to that. Walaupun kayak itu susah banget untuk lo biar bisa push diri lo. Karena lo kadang mikir apakah gue bohong sama diri gue sendiri untuk biar bisa maju doang atau kayak it's that susah lo. Lo kayak are you motivating yourself? Are you lying to yourself? Itu yang kayak pasti ada thought-thoughtnya di mana lo kayak karena nggak ada yang apalagi di dunia seni kita sebagai orang Indonesia, mereka nggak ngerti. Mereka cuma bisa bilang semangat atau nggak cuma bisa bilang, ngerti nggak maksudku? Mereka nggak ada yang bisa yang kasih. Dan itu nothing against them. Cuma kayak kalau aku misalnya waktu lagi kesusahan atau lagi apa, nggak ada yang bisa relate sama aku. Ini juga ini untuk orang-orang bule dan Australia aja nggak tahu, apalagi orang-orang yang orang lain gitu, orang di Indonesia. Kayak mereka cuma bisa bilang semangat atau apa. Jadi kayak tipsnya bukan tips sih, itu kayak lebih caution aja. Susah banget. Cuma kalau lo memang ada drive dan untuk orang-orang yang hungry, kayak jangan walaupun lo rasanya nggak maju, 3 step depan 1 step belakang, 1 step maju 3 step belakang, itu terus aku selama 4 tahun baru bisa nyampe sekarang di mana aku bisa ada kayak umbrella, bisa kerja di university apa segala macam. Jadi kayak don't be afraid of sticking to that kind of anti-mainstream path and pursue that gitu loh.
Yeah, so
there's a lot of things to kind of like
carve out your space.
Carve out your space, exactly. Yeah. That's a good word for it. That's a good word.
I
Yeah.
feel like that is what we're both doing gitu kan. In our own lines of work. So I think that's something that a lot of people should attempt to figure out more, or at least make some headway into figuring that out.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't have to figure it all out now, but like at least make steps to get
incentive there. to do that instead of looking the other way. Just look down, but then go the hellish path.
Yeah.
Like ngerti kan maksudnya? Just look down, ujung-ujungnya lo bakal lihat kok cahaya di ujung sana.
Yeah.
That's what I'm feeling now after like 7 years, 8 years here.
Well, I think that wraps up our conversation today. I think that was pretty great.
That was great.
Thank you.
No, thank you. It was great.
Cool. Okay.